After the Treaty of Berlin, the subsequent history of the Balkans is a tale of successive violations of the Berlin Settlement and the international complications arising from them. The powers had their conflicting ambitions in the Balkans, and they could not agree on any unified policy to grapple with the multifaceted Eastern question. After the Treaty of Berlin, the Eastern question began to reveal new developments. Russia created Big Bulgaria by the Treaty of San Stefano. But the Treaty of Berlin effected a separation between Bulgaria and Eastern Rumelia, which was arbitrary and artificial. It was done because the powers feared that a Big Bulgaria would be the cat paw of Russia. But racial kinship is stronger than treaties. In September 1885, the Turkish governor of Eastern Rumelia was shown out of the province. Prince Alexander of Battenberg was offered the choice of either abdicating or assuming the double crown. He declared himself the Prince of United Bulgaria. Serbia, out of jealousy, declared that Bulgarian aggrandizement threatened the balance of power in the Balkans and went to war with Bulgaria. The Serbians were decisively defeated and the Bulgarian army marched upon Serbia. At this point Austria called a halt, threatening Bulgaria with war unless she ceased hostilities. A peace was signed at Bucharest, restoring the status quo, and Serbia was saved. In the meantime, the question of Bulgarian unification was laid before a conference of the powers. A complete reversal of attitude had taken place in Europe since the days of the Berlin Congress. The powers who had been instrumental in effecting a division of Bulgaria now stood in the support of the Union. On the other hand, Russia was now opposed to the formation of Greater Bulgaria. As anticipated in Berlin, Bulgaria, instead of turning a tool in the hands of Russia, had shown herself obstinately independent and even hostile to Russia. England and Austria, still adhering to the main object of checkmating Russia, concluded that it would be best achieved by supporting independent Big Bulgaria. England took the lead in pressing upon Turkey the recognition of the union of Bulgaria and Eastern Rumelia. It resulted in the formal recognition by the Sultan Abdul Hamid of United Bulgaria. It was the Armenian question that remained at the forefront of the Eastern question from 1896 to 1898. From the Berlin Treaty, the powers, and Great Britain in particular, had shown an awakened interest in the Christian Armenian subjects of the Ottoman Empire. A promise was extracted from the Sultan for the better treatment of the Armenians in the Treaty of Berlin, as well as the Cyprus Convention. It raised the hope of the Armenians. But Turkey remained incorrigible. Sultan Abdul Hamid perceived that the powers were too divided to take any concerted action. The growth of revolutionary agitation among the Armenians and the rise of another independent Christian state in the empire made the Sultan uneasy. In 1894, the process of retribution began. The regular and irregular soldiers of Turkey were let loose among the Armenian villages. Through 1894 and 1895, over 50,000 Armenians had fallen victim to mayhem and outrage. In 1896, the scene was shifted to Constantinople itself. The Armenians living in the capital city rose in revolt and attacked the Turkish bank in Galata. In retaliation, 6,000 Armenians were massacred in the streets of the capital in the next 24 hours. The powers who claimed collective responsibility of the Eastern question remained divided. Russia looked the other way. The Armenians were Gregorian and not Orthodox Christians, so there was no appeal of common faith. Besides, Russia had not recovered from the Bulgarian failure and had no intention of supporting another ungrateful Bulgaria in Armenia. The new Germany, under Kaiser William II, now embarked upon the policy of courting Turkey's friendship. So, instead of putting pressure on the Sultan, Germany displayed her good intentions towards him. On Abdul Hamid's birthday, the Kaiser sent him a signed photograph of himself and the imperial family as a mark of affection. Austria fell into line with Germany. England, left alone, protested and threatened in vain. But Lord Salisbury dared not allow the tragedy to provide the still greater catastrophe of a European war. England reached the conclusion that in supporting Turkey, she had put her money on the wrong horse. The Armenians had barely finished counting their dead when the Eastern question resurfaced in another form. In 1832, at the time of independence, the Greek boundaries were defined by the European powers. The Greeks felt aggrieved, as many areas with Greek population remained outside Greek boundaries, like the Ionian Islands, Crete, Thessaly, Epirus, and Macedonia. The fundamental direction of the Greek foreign policy was the acquisition of these parts of unredeemed Greece. Greece concentrated its main attention on Thessaly and Epirus. During the Crimean War in 1856, Greek soldiers raided Thessaly, but the European powers forced upon King Otto a highly obnoxious neutrality. Nor was Greece rewarded for obedience in the Congress of Paris. Similarly, in the Russo-Turkish War of 1877, Greece raided Thessaly, but was forced to withdraw by the powers, and she got nothing in return. It was the question of Crete, the Greek island par excellence, that stymied the Eastern question. The Turkish rule in Crete was as oppressive as in the Balkans. As many as 14 insurrections took place in Greece against the oppressive rule of Turkey on the island. The revolutionaries in Crete, under the leadership of Eleftherios Venizelos, proclaimed the union with Greece in 1897. Greece, carried away by her own fervor, sent an expedition to help Crete and raided Thessaly. Thereupon Turkey declared war on Greece and was overwhelmingly successful. The European powers, unwilling to see the outbreak of general Balkan conflagration, insisted upon peace. Greece was compelled to cede to Turkey a strategic advantage on the Thessalian frontier and to pay a high indemnity. The powers assumed the responsibility to sort out the Cretan question. But as in the Armenian question, mutual rivalry and jealousies complicated and delayed settlement. Germany and Austria, unwilling to agree on any settlement that would not satisfy Turkey, withdrew from the deliberations. The other powers decided that Crete should be autonomous under Turkish suzerainty. The island was placed under the commission of four powers: Great Britain, Italy, France, and Russia. Prince George, the son of King George of Greece, was appointed as the ruler. The Turkish troops are withdrawn, but the Turkish flag waved side by side with the Cretan. It was not until the Balkan War of 1912 that the powers permitted the union of Crete with Greece. In 1908, a new and tumultuous chapter began in the Eastern question, which was not closed until the whole of Europe was in flames. In July 1908, a revolution broke out in the Turkish Empire. A reforming party had grown in the empire, consisting of Turks mostly educated in the West. This group of young Turks, called the Committee of Union and Progress, was desirous of rejuvenating the decaying Turkish state and of reorganizing it along Western lines. Their demands were partly democratic and largely nationalist. They put forward demands for a constitution, a parliament, freedom of speech, and worship. They wanted to modernize Turkey, free her from foreign tutelage, and pursue a strictly nationalist policy. The Young Turks' propaganda had been spread by means of secret societies and made headway in the army. The Committee of Union and Progress proclaimed the Constitution of 1876, which Sultan Abdul Hamid issued soon after his accession. The 2nd and 3rd Army Corps threatened to march on Constantinople if the demands of revolutionaries were not met. Sultan reissued the constitution, summoned the parliament, proclaimed the personal liberty and religious equality of all his subjects, abolished press censorship, and disbanded his army of 40,000 spies. A few months later, the Sultan tried to bring about a counter-revolution. Therefore, in May 1909, the Young Turks marched into Constantinople, deposed Sultan Abdul Hamid, and proclaimed his brother, Muhammad V, as Sultan of Turkey. The hopes raised by the Young Turks' revolution proved illusory. A reaction set in. A vigorous nationalism became the keystone of the policy of the new party. Turkey embarked upon a policy of Turkification and religious and national persecution. The outbreak of the revolution brought forth all the problems accumulated around the Eastern question. It precipitated a series of events that led to the First World War in 6 years. In Bulgaria, Prince Ferdinand, aware of problems in Turkey and apprehensive of a rejuvenated empire, seized the opportunity. He threw off the suzerainty of the Ottoman Empire and declared his principality a kingdom. In the ancient capital of Trnava, he assumed the historic title of Tsar of Bulgaria. Turkey was furious and appealed to the European powers. The Sultan finally consented to take a money concession. Bulgaria refused to pay, and the war was looming on the horizon. Russia stepped in and averted war by lending Bulgaria most of the indemnity. In April 1909, the Turkish parliament recognized the independence of the Bulgarian kingdom. Soon after, Prince Ferdinand's proclamation, Austria annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina, which she administered as a mandate of the Congress of Berlin. Ever since her expulsion from Germany in 1866, Austria had turned towards the southeast with increasing purpose. The reasons were both economic and racial, and affected the integrity of the empire. Economically, it was essential that Austria should have a secure maritime outlet. Her Adriatic coastline was short and precarious. The annexation of Bosnia and Herzegovina gave Austria hinterland to the Dalmatian coast, linking it up with Hungary. Further, it brought her several miles nearer the Aegean, which could become her maritime outlet if ever she got cut off from the Adriatic. The annexation of Bosnia and Herzegovina was inimical to Serbia. To her, as to Austria, it was economically vital to have a maritime outlet. Further, she had come to look upon herself as the champion and liberator of the southern Slavs, not only in the Turkish territory of Macedonia, but in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Serbia's ambition grew in direct proportion to the discontent of the Slavs in the Austria-Hungary Empire. Austria tried to cripple ambitious Serbia with restricting tariffs, which led to the so-called Pig War in 1905 and 6. The relations between the two were hostile and antagonistic, and ready to flare up on slight provocation. The annexation of Bosnia and the Herzegovinian was a serious blow to the Serbian ambitions. To Europe, it was a menacing disturbance of the balance of power. A serious international crisis was precipitated. But behind Austria-Hungary Empire stood Germany in shining armor, ready to defy Europe. Russia stood weakened by her conflict with Japan, was not ready for a fresh war. For the sake of peace, France, Russia and Great Britain swallowed their humiliation and accepted the annexation. The next startling development came from an unexpected quarter. A unified and resurgent Italy had joined the rank of empire seekers and staked out her claim in the Ottoman Empire. In North Africa, Italy had marked the Turkish vilayet of Tripoli as her enterprise. In 1911, Italy suddenly declared war on Turkey and occupied the coast towns of Tripoli, Benghazi, and Dizna. The war dragged out through 1912 until the appearance of a new danger forced Turkey to terms. By the Peace of Lausanne, Tripoli was ceded to Italy. The next crisis in the Balkans arose out of the unsatisfactory situation in Macedonia. Since the beginning of the 19th century, the serious condition of the Christians of Macedonia engaged the attention of the powers of Europe and of the Balkan states. It had been the subject of many notes on the part of the European powers and of many promises of empty reforms on the part of Turkey. Turkey saw Macedonia gradually passing from her hands. Young Turks tried to rivet the rule of the Ottomans more firmly in Macedonia. It intensified the distress of Christians. As a consequence, it provoked the resentment of their Balkan kinsmen and co-religionists. The Balkan League was formed for this purpose, consisting of Greece, Serbia, Montenegro and Bulgaria. The League demanded the execution of reforms in Macedonia. When Turkey refused to concede to their demands, war was declared in October 1912. The Balkan states were determined to defy the European powers. They embarked upon a holy crusade against their ancient enemy, which also promised them territorial aggrandizement. The first phase of the war lasted for 4 months. Turkey had been overwhelmingly defeated by 4 small Balkan states. She did not hold a foot on the ground in Europe, outside the 4 cities of Constantinople, Adrianople, Jenin and Albanian Scutari. The spectacle of Turkish disintegration again faced Europe. In December, the powers imposed an armistice on the belligerents and convened a conference in London. It was decided that Turkey should surrender Adrianople and retain the other 3 cities. The proposed surrender of Adrianople aroused furious indignation among the Young Turks. The terms were denounced, and the war was resumed between Turkey and the Balkan League. The resumption of war merely heaped more disaster on Turkey. Turkey was forced to come to terms, and in May 1913, peace was made in London. Turkey lost everything except Constantinople, with just enough territory in Thrace to hold it safe. She also ceded Crete to Greece. Albania was created as an autonomous state. This was done mainly at the demand of Austria, which was determined to prevent Serbia from gaining access to the Adriatic. The result was that Austria-Serbia rivalry was greatly intensified. The Balkan League soon broke up on the divisions of spoils. Macedonia was a microcosm of the Balkan problem. It was a no-man's land or all-man's land, where every interest was represented. To Greece, the presence of a large Greek population in Macedonia, and the cultural and spiritual affiliations between the Macedonians and the Greeks, constituted a strong claim to ownership. Serbia based her claims partly on the presence of Slavs in Macedonia, but chiefly on the need for compensation for the Albanian disappointment. Bulgaria protested that Macedonia had a large Bulgar population. As long as straits were held by the alien powers, it was essential that she should have an outlet to the Aegean. The rival claims of the Balkan states were irreconcilable. In June 1913, war broke out between Bulgaria on one side and Serbia, Montenegro, Greece, and Romania on the other. Turkey also joined the Allies in the hope of recovering some territories, which she had recently lost by the Treaty of London. Attacked on all sides, Bulgaria was hopelessly beaten and compelled to sue for peace. At the instance of Austria, who had no wish to see Bulgaria further humiliated, peace was made at Bucharest in August 1913. On all sides, Bulgaria was forced to make concessions. To Romania in the north, she surrendered Silistria and a large part of Dobruja. To Greece, Serbia, and Montenegro she abandoned a considerable section of Macedonia. To Turkey, she gave up Adrianople and a part of Thrace. Territorially, the final results of the two Balkan Wars were the practical extinction of the Ottoman Empire in Europe and the enlargement of the Christian kingdoms. There were other results too. Bulgaria nursed a deep resentment, to which she was to indulge in the First World War. Russia again appeared as the protector of the Balkan states, no longer against Turkey but against Austria. Above all, bitter rivalry between Austria and Serbia came to the fore, in which Austria triumphed and Serbia was worsted. Serbia sought revenge by fueling intrigues among South Slav subjects of the dual monarchy to detach the Bosnia and Herzegovina, Croats, and Slovenes from their allegiance. Austria-Hungary was equally determined to extinguish the Serbian ambitions and was convinced that a severe military defeat was necessary to teach Serbia a lesson. The assassination of Austrian Archduke Ferdinand in June 1914 by a Serbian anarchist in Sarajevo provided an opportunity to settle accounts. The fuse that fired the bomb also fired the First World War.